Live?
Oh, we are live. Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Hi there. Hi there. Hello. Who have we got? Anyone? Is there anyone here? Is anyone on the other side of this camera yet?
We've got 15 people.
15 people.
15. That's good.
That's really good. Make sure you've got a cup of tea.
Yeah. Get comfortable.
Because it's gonna. You can't move once we start.
No,
That'd be rude.
Yes. You can't go and get a cup of tea once we've started. So you've got a few minutes to sort out.
Who have we got, Hippolyte? Who's here?
So far, no one said anything.
Oh. No,
Oh dear.
that's fine. Don't feel the-
Numbers are going up, 17 now.
17.
okay,
That's good. That's in the right direction, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's when we
So-
start boring people that
Yeah.
drop.
When it goes the other way.
Yes, that's
That's worrying. So, we'll start in a few minutes' time, and I'll tell you everything that's happening. But here we are again at the London Buddhist Centre. For those of you already tuning in, here we are. And
We've got Tara and Diane who've arrived, and Anne Cholly.
Ah.
ah,
Hello, Anne. Hello,
Hello.
Tara and Diane.
that's good.
So should we introduce who we've got?
Yes, let's introduce who we've got. So we're down here in the London Buddhist Centre, the main shrine room, with the central heating off, with some of the community. We all live together in the community. So let's introduce everybody. So let's, Emily Odin, you can come forward, yeah, because you're going to be on this very soon. So just put your head in the frame, say hello.
Hey folks, how's it going?
That's Emily Odin.
That's Emily Odin. That was quick. Okay, and whilst we're on
And
island,
David.
Hello everyone.
there we go.
Yeah.
That's David. He's moderating.
Oh yeah. He's moderating.
Yeah.
In fact, he's Irish, isn't
Yeah,
he?
he's Irish as well.
And Matt,
Matt.
come and say hello.
We're all living together
There's
upstairs
10 of
in
us
our
in the community, so some of them are washing up.
Some of them washing up, so we've
That was
escaped
Matt,
washing up.
Matt.
That was
Okay.
Matt. And now,
Now,
last but not least,
our Frenchman.
yeah. So that's our crew for tonight. Crew sounds a good word, doesn't it?
We have 42 on right now.
42, that's
Oh,
great. Welcome,
Hang
everybody.
on, someone else is coming. Come in.
Angel
so-
is saying hello from Mexico.
Oh, wow.
We've got Richie.
Oh, wow.
Hello,
From
Richie.
Mexico.
Adam
Hello.
in Pearly.
Oh, hello.
Adam in Pearly, yeah.
We've got
Richie.
Vinay from Cambridge.
Vinay from Cambridge. Welcome, Vinay.
Oh yeah, nice to see
Oh,
you.
Seb has just walked in. Seb also
Yeah.
lives with us.
Yeah.
Seb's going to come and say hello.
Come and say hello. Yeah. There's a lot of us who live together.
So
But
who's washing
there's
up?
quite a few tonight because people are avoiding washing up. Upstairs, they've changed the sink.
Esther McKinney says
Esther,
hi.
hello.
Hello,
Hi, Esther.
Esther.
Nice to hear from
Harvey
you.
Montague.
Oh,
hello,
Harvey again.
How are you?
You've been to every one, Harvey, I think. We always make the tall joke, Harvey. Tall Harvey joke.
We've got Laura Porter in Saudi Arabia.
Saudi
Wow.
Arabia. Welcome,
Gosh,
Laura.
Welcome,
Wow.
Laura. That's great.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's a long way to hear from, isn't it?
Sanjay is saying that you think they're washing up, but actually they're all watching.
Are they
Oh,
watching? So I hope the washing up is done.
That means that the washing up will be left for when we get
Yes,
back.
that's right. That's how it always is. And I hope you haven't eaten the dessert.
Yes. Maitreyabandhu's cooked cake.
Jenny is saying hi from South California.
Wow.
Wow, gosh.
Hello, Jenny.
Hello,
That's
Jenny.
lovely. So Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Southern California. That's very good, isn't it? And Pearly.
Mustn't forget Pearly. And upstairs.
And upstairs, yeah, upstairs. That's
We
very good.
have now 70 people with us.
17,
That's
that's
very
good.
good, that's great.
That's good.
And Nicole from Northampton, Joanna in Poplar,
Hello,
Flavia
Nicole,
from
Joanna.
Walthamstow,
Oh, Flavia, welcome.
and half of the cake has been eaten.
Oh,
Half
really?
of the cake has been
Oh,
eaten.
no.
This is
This is what we, anyway, sacrifices we make.
So we're going to start
In
in
just a
just a moment, so make sure
Yeah.
you're comfortable.
In this, we won't be doing so much meditation, but just to let you know, a little bit, not very much. But yeah, do get yourself comfortable, get what you need, and then we'll start. This is all preamble, and we'll start
Now,
just actually now.
we're live.
We're live.
I mean, proper live.
We're live now. So welcome everyone, welcome to the London Buddhist Centre, to the virtual London Buddhist Centre, the London Buddhist Centre online. First thing I want to say is that we've got, you can tune in, just to remind you if you don't know this yet, you can tune in any weekday from 7 o'clock to 8 p.m. and we're online every weekday from 7 to 8. Yes, so tune in every weekday evening. So the shape of it is on Monday night we have our Dharma night class, which is the more emphasis on Buddhism. There's also going to be meditation in that. Tuesday and Wednesday, they're more meditation-focused nights, although there will be also teaching. So, all of this is completely open to anyone, people who come along to the London Buddhist Centre already. And I know a lot of you are coming in from, elsewhere, and we're having quite a few people who are new to the London Buddhist Centre, at least in this online format. So that's great. That's completely fine.
Very, very welcome.
So Tuesday, Wednesday is more towards meditation. Thursday is going to be a little bit different because Jnanavaca and I are going to be effectively telling stories, or we'll tell a story over a sort of sequence of weeks. I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. And then on Friday, Surya Gupta, who's the chair of the London Buddhist Centre, she's going to again be teaching about leading some meditation to round off the week. So every every weekday evening, tune in at 7 o'clock and we'll be here. One of us will be here, yeah. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to explore parables. I'm going to say something about why we've chosen to talk about parables and stories, how we're going to do it. Then I'll lead us through in a really quite short meditation just to sort of calm us down, settle us down. And then Jnanavaca, by the way, this is Jnanavaca, I'm Maitreyabandhu, we didn't do that bit. Then Jnanavaca will start to talk about one of the parables that we're going to choose, and we'll carry on that next week. Yeah, and then again there'll be time for questions after Jnanavaca's spoken. We'll both take questions, and then we'll finish probably with a transference of merit and self-surrender as a way of rounding off the evening. Yeah. So yes, we're going to start this series of Thursday night evenings talking about the parable of the burning house. I'll leave Jnanavaca to mostly say what that parable is. But I want to say a little bit before we start about the nature of parable. Why parable? Why parables and myths and stories? Perhaps before I say why, just say how we're going to do it. So every evening we'll tell you a bit of the story and we'll unpack it as we go, and we'll see how long it takes. It's a bit of an experiment, really.
We won't get through the whole parable, the whole story this week.
Yes,
so
that's right.
Wait till next Thursday.
So hopefully we'll finish on a cliffhanger, as it were, but we won't get through the whole parable. So we'll see how long it takes. So we'll start tonight, start unpacking the meaning of the parable, carry on the next night, and then we'll bring in another parable, and so it will go on. Yeah. So the stories will cross over the week. So I hope you'll come and join us and carry on with the parable. And of course you can watch these after the event, as it were. There, how do you say that?
Recorded, aren't they?
Recorded, yeah.
So you can watch them any time.
So you can watch them any time, yeah. But it's great to have you here live. You wouldn't think that was that difficult. Anyway, so parable. The reason we wanted to talk about parables and stories, rather than sort of, I don't know, we could have chosen to sort of give you a bit of Buddhist teaching, clear Buddhist teaching. But there's something particular about parables, legends, myths, stories, even fairy stories, that they're to do with your intimate experience now. There's something slightly magical about the story format. So much can be inside a story or a parable. Often the parable shape is often pretty universal and pretty simple, but when you open it up, there's all this meaning. And I think it's always meaning for you, the individual now. It's not, I don't think parables particularly interested in, I don't know, history or politics or abstractions. It's saying, I think parables are saying to you, your life is a bit like this, isn't it? And if you delve into a parable, at times you can think, gosh, that's exactly how I experience things. It's as if stories, myths, parables, legends, fairy stories can be more accurate because of their sort of story format than universal abstractions, more telling, more particular. The other great thing about parable and myth and story is they're a bit like dreams. They can mean different things at different times. So you keep on coming upon a parable or a story, and you find more in it each time. As you change, as the world changes, different elements of the parable come forward, or the story come forward. Also, it can, like a dream, it can mean seemingly contradictory things at the same time. Or like a poem, it can mean two things, three things at the same time. And sometimes those things can contradict. And the depth of the parable never ends, I don't think. Because a parable that's lived, and these parables have lived for thousands of years, it's because they're saying something very direct about lived experience, what it's like to be human. So that's why we're, I think, very simply, why we're using parable and myth and story and legend. Yeah? So let's prepare for that by doing a very short meditation. So I don't know what you'll be sitting on. You're probably just sitting in front of your computer, or you've got your phone. And so let's just spend a few minutes. So when you're ready, just closing your eyes. So if you're sitting on a chair, it's probably good to sit on the floor. No, it isn't, sorry. It's probably good to have your feet on the floor. Try and be as comfortable as you can. We're not going to meditate very long. And then when you're ready, closing your eyes. And as soon as you've closed your eyes, see if you can engage with your body. So I was saying last night in the Wednesday online class, you don't need to think about your body. You don't need to picture your body. Just see what you can feel just now of your body. Particularly feel the weight of your body on the floor, your feet on the floor, your weight supported in the chair, if you're sitting in a chair. And just see if you can tell if you're gripping with your shoulders. We're very often doing that, so especially if we've been bent over a computer and so on. So just see if you can relax your shoulders. And sometimes all you need to do is just imagine that happening. And see if you can soften your belly. We're very often gripping our belly. We do that automatically without noticing it. So just see if you can soften your belly. And then just gathering your awareness around your breath. So you can feel your body, the weight of your body on the chair, the warmth of your body. And then you can just tune into breath coming in and going out. Following the whole breath in and the whole breath out. extend your awareness to include more and more of your body sensations, however they are just now, whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable. Tuning into the sounds around you, so you can be aware of your body and you can be aware of the sounds around you. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes. Okay, so that just helps us, I hope, settle into the body a bit, because parables are about discovering your imagination, and your imagination arises from your body, not just from your thinking. It's not a fantasy. So let's turn to you, Jnanavaca, and start to explore this first parable we're going to talk about.
Thank you, Maitreyabandhu. Yes, a very warm welcome from me. And I think the first thing I want to say is that whatever state you're in physically, whatever state you're in emotionally, I think what I want to say is that there is a way of practicing. There is a way that the Dharma is relevant to whatever state you're in. And the state you're in, if the situation is anything to do with it, keeps changing. My own state, I just notice it's changing, if not moment to moment, certainly hour by hour, and certainly day by day. And there is a way of making the Dharma relevant, whether you can formally meditate, which would be great, or even if you find yourself unable to meditate, it's still got something to say to our current experience that will be helpful. So these parables are, as Maitreyabandhu was saying, they speak to us directly, and what we're hoping is that they'll speak to us now in whatever state each of us is in. Yeah? So tonight I want to start talking about the parable of the burning house. A couple of times in the last few times probably, we've mentioned the parable of the burning house because it just feels so obviously relevant to what we're facing, what we seem to be facing at the moment. The parable of the burning house comes from a sutra called the White Lotus Sutra. The White Lotus Sutra, which is a sort of book-length sutra, not one of the most massive sutras, but a really important sutra in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, later Buddhist tradition. And the sutra has, it's got sort of prose sections and verse sections. And in amongst the sutra, there are lots of stories told by the Buddha, sometimes told by some of his disciples. The sutra itself takes place, it has a dramatic setting, it takes place on a place called Vulture's Peak, which is in Bihar in India. It's a rocky sort of hill, sort of outcrop, dramatic, sort of not quite a mountain, but certainly dramatic. The Buddha's sitting on top of Vulture's Peak, Gurudhara, and he's surrounded by thousands, tens of thousands of disciples, human and non-human. So we're in this sort of a mythical world. It's not a sutra from the Pali Canon. It's a mythical, imaginal setting. And the Buddha isn't just the historical Buddha. He's the Buddha of the visionary Buddha. A bit like you can probably see the Buddha behind me, the Buddha Rupa, the golden Buddha. behind me, the archetypal Buddha, he's teaching all of these thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of disciples, human and non-human, gods, arahants, all sorts of very advanced disciples, spiritually advanced disciples. He's teaching them this sutra called the White Lotus Sutra. And before he talks about the parable that I want to talk about, the parable of the burning house, before he does that, shortly before that anyway, something dramatic has happened in the sutra, in the story of the sutra. And so I'm going to start with that because I think it's just a very interesting little episode. What the Buddha says to all of these disciples is that so far he hasn't taught them the highest truth. So far they haven't really encountered what enlightenment, full and perfect enlightenment, really is. So far they have thought that enlightenment consists in the ending of greed, the ending of hatred, the ending of delusion. All craving, all aversion, all spiritual ignorance is extinguished, and therefore suffering, or at least mind-made suffering, is extinguished with them. So the Buddha says that's okay, that's fine, that's really valuable, but it's really, in a way, the jumping off point, the starting point for a much bigger ideal, a much bigger vision. And that vision consists in developing positive qualities of love, of generosity, of patience, of empathy, of wisdom, in limitless, open-ended, in an open-ended manner. There's no limit to metta, for example. You can say there's a limit to not harming people, perhaps you could say, but in terms of metta, it's open-ended. And the Buddha's pointing out this glorious positive ideal, this cosmic ideal, because in this open-ended dimension, he's saying that our potential is limitless. Somehow we're aligned with the unfolding nature of the cosmos. Everything wants to grow, everything wants to develop. We're part of that cosmos. Our practice isn't just a personal affair, it's related to something vast, vast beyond comprehension. Anyway, so I can't do it really justice, but I haven't really got time to explore that much more. But he's outlined a much bigger vision, and a positive vision. Because sometimes I think even today, we can think of Buddhism rather in personal terms, as if I want to just make my life a little bit more comfortable, a bit happier. I don't want to suffer in the way that I do, I've been, and Buddhism will help me. And that's true. But what the Buddha is saying to these disciples is that that's a limited vision of the goal. The goal is cosmic, it's vast. And the interesting thing is that there's a number of disciples, it said 5,000 of them, who are, well, everybody's sort of shocked by this revelation, but 5,000 of these disciples don't want to know. They say, no, the Buddha's got it wrong, we've already reached enlightenment, there are no higher teachings, and they walk out. They walk out of this assembly. It's quite a dramatic thing to happen when you've got the Buddha in your midst telling you a teaching, and these so-called enlightened disciples decide he's wrong, and they're so sort of haughty, I guess, or arrogant, or affronted even by the notion that they haven't reached the ultimate goal. They leave. 5,000 of them leave. It's shortly after that that the Buddha teaches the parable of the burning house, and I'll come on to that. He teaches it in request to a question by Shariputra, one of his chief disciples, who's also a historical disciple. Anyway, before I come on to that, the fact that these people walk out, I find very, very interesting, because what you've got there is in ancient India, you had, well, two things going on. One, you had some people who had settled down in their Dharma lives for a lesser ideal. Probably, I think the implication is, at least how I read it, is that they'd settled down in some sort of self-centered, comfortable notion of Dharma practice, as if, yeah, they'd got what they want, they were comfortable, they'd ended suffering, at least probably in its grosser form, and that was it. So they'd settled down and they'd closed their minds to anything higher. So that's the second point I want to make, that they were unreceptive. They were unreceptive even to the Buddha. And the reason I want to make that point is that today in modern Buddhism, and particularly maybe in the modern West, we've got so many different notions of what the goal is, what enlightenment is, even what Buddhism is, what the Dharma is. And it's possible to see the Dharma, and now I'm sort of just taking a sort of extreme position for illustration. It's possible to see the Dharma as just a therapeutic tool to make oneself a little bit more comfortable. And it's possible to say that any transcendental vision or goal, idea of the goal, i.e. something that transcends this known world of space and time and matter and me and you, anything that transcends that vision is fantasy. It's possible to say that. And people do, I think modern Western Buddhists do sort of say sometimes that all of those more mythic dimensions, even the transcendental dimensions, are accretions from an Eastern culture rather than pure Dharma. And they even deny that the Buddha taught them. So I think that's just very interesting, because if that were the sort of Buddhism, if that was all there was to Buddhism personally, I wouldn't be interested. My life is, I'm fortunate at the moment, who knows what happens tomorrow, but at the moment, and so far in my 54 years, I've lived a fairly comfortable life. And practicing the Dharma has made it all the more rich, enjoyable. I've got really good friends, many of whom I live with. If I was just trying to be comfortable in my life, I wouldn't practice. I could stop now. I could sort of put my feet up and watch Netflix and still be relatively happy. I might carry on meditating because I enjoy meditating, but anything that sort of was more demanding than that, that forced me to go beyond myself, I probably wouldn't do. I'm motivated by a vision that is transcendent. I really want to understand, not even understand, that's not the right word, is it? I want to realize what the truth of the Dharma really is, what the truth of life is, who are we really, what is this world, this cosmos, this universe. We've just discovered apparently, you may not have read it in all the coronavirus stories, but scientists have found evidence for something called an intermediate black hole. An intermediate black hole. I can't go into it because I don't really know what it is. But you've got these super giant black holes, and then you've got these smaller ones, I guess. Now they've discovered an intermediate one. That's important for some reason. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that even at a material level, we haven't got a clue as to what's going on. But the Buddha is pointing to a transcendent vision that is outside this material universe, and he's saying we're part of that. It's not that we leave the material behind, but within the material, we realize something transcendent. Within ourselves, we realize something transcendent. Anyway, these 5,000 disciples aren't hearing that. They're not willing to hear that, and they go off. So that's the start. That's the sort of one of the things at the start of the sutra, the White Lotus Sutra. Anyway, a little bit later on, Shariputra asks the Buddha to explain what he means. And the Buddha says, I'll tell you a story, I'll give you a parable, because just as Maitreyabandhu was saying, he says that sometimes people will better understand a story than an abstract conceptual teaching. The Buddha used both languages of concept, and story and imagination, and we need both. We need both. Even if we don't think we do, we do. We need both, because the human heart, the human mind, doesn't always respond to reason. In a way, we're seeing that at a time like this. In a way, we're seeing something beautiful as well as tragic at a time like this. A lot of people are responding to the situation with kindness. That's an opening of the human heart. This situation of dukkha, this situation of death, of potential death, of sickness. One of the responses that people are, many millions of people are responding with, is with generosity and kindness. And hopefully we are too, as practitioners. I hope we are too. But that's not necessarily a rational response. You might be able to explain it in genetic terms and things, but I think the human heart responds to beauty and to love and values that can't just be reduced to physical atoms and biological explanations. So anyway, the Buddha starts telling this story. And the story is what it's become known as the parable of the burning house. What I'm going to draw on is Bhante Sangharakshita's commentary of the Sutra and of this story in a book called The Drama of Cosmic Enlightenment. So I'm drawing on Bhante's commentary. And anyway, the story is that there once was, as there always is, once upon a time, there was this very wealthy elder, this rich man who owned this very, very large mansion, this huge mansion. And he had hundreds of servants. The story doesn't mention his wives, but he must have had wives, because he had lots and lots of children, So I think Bhante talks about 30 children. And the elder, their father, loved his children. The children at the start of the parable are playing in the mansion. But the mansion isn't just an ordinary mansion. Well, first of all, it's crumbling. It's decaying. It's the walls are crumbling. There's dust and dirt everywhere. The floorboards have got holes in. Water leaks through. It's a decaying mansion. So that's interesting, isn't it? Considering that the man, the elder, he's never named, is said to be really wealthy. So yet he has this decaying mansion. And it's also haunted. So there are ghosts in the corners, in the darkness, in the unlit corners. There are ghosts who haunt the mansion and the house. And the kids are the children are all oblivious to the dangers of the mansion, the crumbling down, decaying mansion, and to the fact that it's haunted. They're oblivious to it. Now, at the start of the parable, the father, the elder, who is actually the Buddha, that's what he equates to in the parable. The father is outside the mansion. That's significant as well. Maybe we'll come on to that. He's not in the mansion. He's outside. And what he sees is that the mansion's on fire. The house is on fire. And the children, the kids, don't know that it's on fire. They're running around with their toys, their games, and they can't see that anything is wrong, that there's any sense of danger. So that's the sort of opening scene. So I want to just look at some of those, the symbolism of some of those things. And as Maitreyabandhu said, we'll have time for questions at the end. So be thinking of questions if, as I talk, and then we'll see what we can do. So the house, the mansion, the house, the decaying, crumbling house is, well, it seems obvious, it's the world. It's our world, it's samsara. I don't mean by the world just our planet, I mean the whole of samsaric existence, the whole of our cosmos. Buddhism sees not just this plane of existence, but other dimensions, other planes of everything. All of conditioned existence is the house, and it's crumbling. It's always decaying. It's not pristine. It's dangerous already, let alone the fire. It's not the sort of place to be playing in, although the children are. But the father isn't in that mansion. He's outside of it. But he's interested in it. Do you see what I mean? He's the children, his children, who he feels a kinship with, of course he does, they're his children, are in it, and he's concerned about them. So I think that does sort of somehow illustrate that the Buddha, he's not in samsara. He's not in this conditioned world. His mind isn't. And there is, I guess more fundamentally, there is an outside the mansion, to use that language. Outside's a metaphor. All of this is metaphor. But outside is a metaphor because this samsaric world includes time and space. So I don't know what it is to talk about outside of space. Outside is a spatial metaphor, and it's not possible really to talk in conceptual terms about outside of time and space. Anyway, there is an outside. There's another dimension that we're unaware of, and the Buddha is in that dimension. That's his home, not this mansion. But the interesting thing, Maitreyabandhu was pointing this out to me earlier, is that he's the father of these children. He's the father. The children are his children. And what Maitreyabandhu, you were pointing out, is that there's a kinship with the Buddha. There's a relationship. It's not that the Buddha is some complete other. Somehow we're related. There's something of the Buddha's experience as a potential within all of us. We really are in the family of the Buddha. We're in the lineage of the Buddha. We're his children. Not in that theistic way, not in the sense that the Buddha's a creator God and the father in all of that sort of sense. In a more poetic way, in a more mysterious way than that, there is something of us that has a relationship with enlightenment, a potential for enlightenment. Human consciousness has the potential for enlightenment. But we don't know that most of the time, and we're playing in samsara with our toys. And samsara is a dangerous place. It's a dangerous place. It always has been. Every so often we realize the danger, and it feels like now, with this pandemic, we're seeing something perhaps more of us anyway, are being more confronted by the true nature of samsara. But then the house is on fire. Oh no, let me come on to the ghosts. Let's I hope to come onto the fire, but we may not get time. We should come onto the fire because it's the burning house. Anyway, the ghosts. The fact that the mansion is haunted, I think, is significant. Everything's significant in this story. Bhante in his commentary talks about the ghosts as us being haunted by our past conditioning, our past sanskaras, our habits. We're somehow trapped by our past sometimes, anyway, often, a lot of the time. We're not able to sort of free ourselves from our habitual ways of being, at least not very easily. But I think the ghosts are something else as well. I think they're not just the past, but they're the views that surround us. If the house, if the mansion is our world, it's haunted by sometimes invisible presences that have nevertheless a force and effect. And you could say that they're all the cultural assumptions and views that we don't see because we're embedded. I mean, this is mixing metaphors. They're the sort of water we swim in. We're embedded in a world with these views. These ghosts are haunting us all the time. I'm not going to go into lots of worldly views. I've touched on one, which is materialism, scientism, scientific materialism. It's a view that we are only our flesh, that the body is all there is, that matter is all there is, that is the only reality, that imagination, emotion, volition, higher states of consciousness, consciousness itself, they're all either unreal or not as real as stuff that we can touch, matter. So that's a view, but it's so embedded in our culture that we don't realize it's haunting us. And it is haunting. Haunting's the right word, I think, isn't it? Because it really affects our lives and it affects our practice of the Dharma. It's an insidious view that gets everywhere, as it were. It gets into everything. Anyway, that's one example of a ghost. Maybe in the questions you can think of other ghosts, questions or comments that we're sort of surrounded by. One of the interesting things about this pandemic, I think, is it's showing up the ghosts a little bit. I mean, the ghosts of everything's fine, I'm in control, I know what I'm doing with my life, I'm well, and I always sort of will be well, that I'm going to live forever, that this virus only affects those that are already very old. You know, even that was a view just a few days ago that was being, we were told about. All of these views, do you see that they're being, all those assumptions are being exposed for what they are, and that's deeply unsettling when you start to see the ghosts that are haunting us. But yes, the mansion's on fire, the house is on fire, and fire is, it's just such a potent symbol for danger, for the urgency of our situation. The Buddha, shortly after his enlightenment, taught something called the fire sermon, where he said, the world is on fire. It's on fire with the fires of lust, of greed, of selfishness. It's on fire with the fire of hatred, of anger, of resentment. It's on fire with the fire of delusion, with spiritual ignorance. Everything is burning. Everything is always burning. The universe is burning. And the White Lotus Sutra, this parable, is using the same imagery. The house is on fire. And the kids, the children, don't know that. And we don't know that. So that's another thing that I think the Dharma, the Buddha, is always trying to tell us, look, you're in a precarious situation, samsara. And the reason he's telling us this is, and this is really important, it goes back to what I was saying at the start, the reason he's telling us, because there's a way out. There is a way out of this samsaric situation, this precarious round of birth and death and rebirth and re-death and perpetual lack of fulfillment. There is a way out of that. There is a way out of the house. That's why he's telling us that the house is on fire, to make us snap out of our complacency and find a way out. And he's pointing to the way out. So that's the sort of opening of this parable, this scene. The father's outside, the Buddha's outside, his children are inside the house. They don't know the danger that they're in this haunted, crumbling mansion that is now on fire. And the father, the Buddha, as he is trying to work out how to get them out. Well, the first thing, of course, that he thinks is, I'm going to run in and physically take each child out, and then realizes that he won't have time. There are too many children, and the danger is the fire is, the house is crumbling, and he won't have time to rescue them all. He's got to think of another way. He's got to think of another way. He can't come and rescue each of us, or any of us actually. The Buddha won't save us. The Buddha isn't like this omnipotent creator that can save you. The Buddha has to show us the way, but we have to listen. Shall I leave it there? Maybe I'll leave it there
for now.
So that's just the opening sort of, there's probably more to explore just even in that. Maybe we can explore that a bit. Maitreyabandhu and I will both sort of comment to your questions. Hopefully you've got comments or questions. There's more to explore in all of that.
Yeah.
And then next week we'll carry on, Maitreyabandhu will carry on with the story of this burning house, these children trapped but not realizing they're trapped. The children with their games. The games, that's a whole other thing, isn't it?
And the more you, even when you go over it again, you every image, every sort of has deeper, you think, oh yes, but that's got a resonance.
Yes,
So you'll find as you think about it in the week between us, that you'll think, oh, actually, that it goes deeper than that.
What games are we playing?
Yeah, what are the games we're playing?
What literally are we doing with our lives? From the most obvious to the seemingly most sort of serious. From a certain point of view, from the Buddha's point of view, they're all games. Games of somehow egotism, of trying to big myself up, of trying to distract myself from deeper truths, etc., etc. Anyway, let's see if there are any. There is a question.
There is a question. Yeah.
So Hippolyte's going to read the question out.
Yeah. So Liz is asking, how do I recognize my delusional thoughts, or I guess the ghosts during meditation? How do you spot them?
How do you spot them? Yeah. Sometimes I don't think meditation's enough, actually.
No, that's right.
Because in meditation, you're meditating with the mind, with the assumptions, the delusions, the ghosts already part of it. You see what I mean? We're trying to, in meditation, sort of purify our minds to let it clear, but still, it's the mind that we've got is the one that's meditating. So sometimes I think we need something external helping us see our delusions, our ghosts. So I think Dharma study is really, really important. I think friendship is really, really important because some of our ghosts are cultural. Some of them, yes, are universal, but some of them are really personal. If I don't know, I could be haunted by a ghost that says nobody likes me, that I'm unlovable, I'm unlikable. If I have that, that's my personal ghost. Does that make sense? So sometimes it takes people who know us well, friends, Dharma friends, not just mates or drinking partners or whatever, but Dharma friends who are willing to point out to us perhaps uncomfortable things, things that we might not be aware of in ourselves. A true friend, a Dharma friend, will take the risk of saying, look, I think you're trapped in this particular view that's really not helping you grow. That's what comes to mind. Dharma study, Dharma friends. Meditation's important.
But not meditation isn't something to have on its own, is it really? Part of a whole context. In a way, that's the vision of Sangha, is that you're saying to each other in a really healthy Sangha that you can, that I'll interact intensively with you and you can do that with me, including sometimes saying, actually, look, I think there is something here for you. You have to do that very well and positively and kindly. But it's a real gift if someone can do that for you.
Does that help? I don't know if that answers your question. Say if it does.
Meanwhile,
meanwhile,
okay.
Sorry, we've got.
Meanwhile, we have other questions. There's two people asking the same question.
Okay.
Why do you think the children are so clueless? Why can't they see fire?
Who's asking that?
We have Suvanantara and Sandra Keating.
Sandra and Savanatara. Why are the children so clueless?
I feel pretty clueless myself. It's interesting. Those questions are, I think,
Why questions? you
Why
mean?
questions are problematic because it's not saying. It's just saying, well, that's what human beings are like. It's not trying to get underneath why human beings like that. I think it's just saying we're pretty clueless. Ignorance, spiritual ignorance, not really knowing the truth of things, is what makes us human, almost in a certain sort of way. It's not trying to say, yeah, but it's not trying to imagine what could have caused that. It's just saying that's what we're like. And the first thing to do is to start to admit to that I don't know. That's a lot of people, I think, all of us could do better at getting to actually tell what I don't really know. I'm a bit clueless.
I think being clueless, and I include myself, is keeps us in the familiar. Part of me doesn't want to step out of the house or of my own sense of who I am. It's familiar.
Yeah,
Therefore,
that's true,
it feels safe. Even though it's not safe, somehow the familiar feels safe. I don't want to, like in this situation that we're in, this time of crisis, I and others have been saying it's a time to reflect, really reflect on what matters. I mean, what matters individually in our lives, what matters as human beings, what is it that's most important in our lives. So I've been saying that, and yes, at times I've been trying to do that, but I find myself, over the last few days, I've been introduced to a computer game by David and called Mario Kart by David and Matt. They asked me to play, and I thought, oh, well, I'll just give them a laugh by playing, you know, to entertain them, as it were.
They don't get out much.
They don't get out much. I don't get out. And I was hooked. So and I'm rubbish at it. There I am trying to practice the Dharma, trying to reflect on the Lotus Sutra and conditioned reality, death, my mortality, sickness. The world is on fire, more than ever, perhaps, more obviously than ever, because it's not more than ever.
No.
Death was always happening around us, and sickness. And there I am, quite happy to distract myself, driving around some...
So the games can be literal games, can't
Yeah,
they?
well, they can.
Like Xbox games.
Yeah, well, which I've never done before. I have to say, I've never done,
Yeah, no, you never done them.
apart from 2 or 3 days ago, and then, now
And you're going to stop.
I'm going to stop. Yeah. Let's say I've stopped.
So staying on the topic of games,
Yeah.
Nina is asking, can all acts be considered as game, or can very redeeming acts, such as being a doctor in these times, not be considered a game?
Yeah, good point, Nina.
Yeah.
I think from a certain perspective, it's all a game, but that's probably not a very helpful perspective to start off with. So I think if we're just going to use toys and games in a pejorative sense, then yes, certain things are really just distractions that are trivial, that are stopping us from growing. And then other things do help us grow as human beings. They do help us move towards enlightenment. Generosity, kindness is always something that helps us sort of come out of our smallness. So there are many people now who are serving in the NHS and elsewhere in society who are being very, very generous, courageous and kind. And from a dharmic perspective, that's they're taking a risk of their lives. They're risking their lives, some of them. That's a very noble, growthful thing to do. So I wouldn't want to just reduce everything to the same level. At the same time, Buddhism teaches that this side of enlightenment, all of us are somehow lost in a world of delusion, and even us sort of, I don't know, doing our best. In a way, they're just better games. Um, an enlightened being, a bodhisattva, let's just take a bodhisattva, sort of engages in our world, but the bodhisattva is said to be playing a game as well.
Yes, that's right. It's a transcendental game.
A transcendental game. And his game or her game is a game of love, of kindness, of compassion, of trying to alleviate suffering. But even a Buddha or a bodhisattva doesn't take that game too seriously in the wrong sense of the word. In that what Buddhism is saying is that reality is not what it seems. So even the things that we take very seriously, like death, are not what they seem. If you imagine this cycle of birth and death, of infinite lives, that we've had endless lives before us and we'll have endless lives to come, death in this life is not what we take it for. It's another doorway or something. I take it very seriously. So if I was, if friends or loved ones were dying, or if I was on my deathbed, and who knows when that might happen, for many of us it's happening sooner than we had thought, of course it feels serious. So I'm not trying to trivialize it. I'm just trying to say that there's a vaster perspective.
It's a bit, just reflecting on it, it's a little bit interesting that children are playing games in the house. And there's supposed to be this huge mansion. But remember that the Buddha is outside, in the vast extents of outside. So it's also a metaphor for there's always a bigger perspective.
Yeah.
The children are small and immature and playing with little games in a mansion, and outside the mansion is this massive perspective that the Buddha has.
Yeah.
So there's also a metaphor, I think, of perspective on things.
Yes, it's a perspective thing, yeah. So that's
guess-
Nina, yeah?
I guess staying
One
on
more?
the same topic, Joe is asking, do you really think that the world is more on fire than ever, or has humanity made some progress?
Yeah. Well, they're two different things, because I don't know whether humanity has made some progress. In some ways we have, and in some ways maybe we haven't.
You definitely have in some ways.
In some ways we have, and civilization as we've got it is much, for most people, we're living a much kinder, healthier, comfortable life than people just even a few hundred years ago, a couple of hundred years ago for most people. Yes, there's been progress in some ways. Existentially, I don't know if there's been any kind of progress in terms of our delusion about who we are and what life is, and our deep-seated tendency to identify with ourselves as the center of things and everything else is outside of us. That's a spiritual existential matter, and I don't think in that sense we will automatically make progress as a species. I think individual effort is what's needed, and some people make that effort. But the world on fire, in some ways the world is always on fire. I was reading about how many people in this country, because we're hearing, aren't we, every day we're hearing of hundreds of new deaths in this country alone, thousands over the world. But then I was also reading about how many people die in this country every year, regardless of the pandemic that we're facing. You don't read about those normally. Do you see what I mean? The death is always there. Something will kill us in the end. If it's the coronavirus or if it's something else, cancer, an accident. Human life is finite. It's what am I trying to say? It's always on fire. It's always on fire.
And that was always the case.
But now, because there's this one focus on the coronavirus as the chief danger, I think we're united around that as a danger. Does that make sense? It's interesting in India, some of those interviews that you've probably been watching, I've been watching, and people saying, daily wage earners, daily workers are saying, I may or may not get the virus, but if I obey the lockdown, I'm going to starve to death. So the world is on fire for them, regardless of the virus, if that makes sense.
Perhaps we should start to think of drawing this to a close for
Yeah.
now, and then next Thursday we'll continue with the parable and continue. I mean, as I said, you'll find that as you go through it, there's more and more
Yes.
meaning in it. It's
Yes.
like a dream, like a poem. You keep on discovering new depths to it.
So sorry if we didn't get to your questions, or if
Yes,
we've answered
yeah,
them
yeah.
rather
Gently.
yes, or skimmed over them.
Yeah.
Maybe we can come back to things. So think about it more, and we can come back to it next Thursday. We'll come back. So for now, Maitreyabandhu is going to lead us in a ritual. But once again, I want to say, well, thank you for joining us. It's really lovely for me, for us, I'm sure, to know that we're speaking to people live, as it were.
Yeah.
It's the next best thing to actually having you face to face.
We were a bit surprised that when I first did one, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I thought it's not going to make much difference whether it's
Yeah.
live or recorded, but
Yeah.
it makes a lot of difference. I've been so struck by that.
I think it is creating Sangha in some way, and I feel grateful, privileged to be part of that. So thank you for that. We want to emphasize that all the teaching at the LBC, in fact in Triratna, is done by volunteers. The culture of Sangha is also a culture of generosity. And if you can contribute to that through giving, that would be very, very valuable, particularly at this time. It'd be very, very valuable. There's no obligation to. It has to be free. I would not want to be paid for teaching the Dharma, and I wouldn't want you to feel obligated to pay for it. But if you can participate in this culture of generosity that we're creating, I think we need a culture of generosity. The world needs a culture of generosity. Actually, it's happening, isn't it? Through this a difficult time, more people are discovering how valuable generosity is. And if you can give, that would be really helpful. So if you want to give, you can click on the link in the description. It's also in the comments. A monthly gift would be the most valuable in that it helps us plan and stay forward-looking, stay on track. But a one-off gift is fine too, but a monthly is really, really helpful, particularly now. Anyway, that's an invitation for you to contribute and, in a way, connect with Sangha. I think contributing helps me anyway feel connected, and at this time when we're sometimes physically so separate, connection is what we need more than ever.
Yeah, Sangha is always something you're participating in, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not something you can sort of watch from the sidelines. You need to participate in
Yeah.
Sangha for it to be Sangha.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual community, yeah. So thank you very much, Jnanavaca. Let's finish for this evening, and we'll come back to the White Lotus Sutra and to this wonderful profound parable next Thursday. So do, let it turn over in your mind and gather its own meaning for you, because parable has intimate meaning for you. So let's finish, though, by saying that what we're doing here, you watching us here in the centre, the guys in our community coming down here to help us, we're doing all of this for the welfare of everybody in the world. Yeah? So the transference of merit and self-surrender, and we'll do this in call and response. May the merit gained in my acting thus go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. My personality throughout my existences. My possessions. And my merit in all three ways. I give up without regard to myself. For the benefit of all beings. Just as the earth and other elements. Are serviceable in many ways. To the infinite number of beings. Inhabiting limitless space. So may I become. That which maintains all beings. Situated throughout space.
situated throughout space,
so long as all have not attained
so long as all have not attained
to peace.
to peace.
Thank you very much. Thank you.